At 1:47 a.m., a Linotype operator is midway through a murder story when the machine refuses to give him the next letter. His finger had already hit the key. The copy reads, "Police," but no matrix drops. He pauses. The composing room does not revolve around him. Dozens of machinery clang beneath electric lighting. Brass matrices moved through magazines. Metal slugs strike the trays. Proofreaders make corrections. Compositors call out for missing lines. Somewhere below, presses are awaiting pages that do not yet exist. The morning edition has a deadline, and every minute spent mending this equipment benefits the press room. The operator presses the key again. Nothing. He cannot just type over the missing letter. A Linotype does not use ink on paper. It creates molds for a full line, presses molten metal against them, and casts the words as a single solid strip of metal. If one character is incorrect, the error becomes metal. So he clears the fault he can safely reach, tests the key, and gets the desired little metallic click. A brass matrix drops. He completes the word and line, then sends it to the casting mechanism. Inside the machine, metal heated to around 550 degrees Fahrenheit is pressed against the constructed matrices. Seconds later, a hot slug drops into the tray next to him. One line from tomorrow morning's news is now metal. He begins the following line instantly. Because by morning, thousands of words must undergo the same change. It is the middle of the 20th century, and a newspaper composing room is one of the last areas in the building to receive news, and one of the first to experience physical delay. Reporters and editors can still update a story with a pencil. The Linotype operator cannot. When he casts a line, the sentence becomes a piece of type metal with raised letters along one edge. His shift frequently starts when most of the city is heading to bed. He arrives at a row of machines that resemble small factories rather than typewriters. Each Linotype consists of a tower of magazines, gears, cams, belts, levers, a keyboard, an assembler, a distributor, and a pot with molten type metal. The operator inspects his machine before the rush. The metal pot must be heated, the magazines loaded with the appropriate matrices, and the spacebands and distributor free to move. Dirt or a faulty calibration can cause a delay just when the copy starts arriving quickly. Operators at smaller factories frequently maintained much of the machinery themselves. Larger newspaper operations employed machinists for extensive repairs, but the operator still had mechanical skills to identify problems and make minor modifications. The U.S. Department of Labor classifies Linotype and Intertype operators as skilled composing room craftsmen. Then the first copy appears on his board. It may be local news, sports, market prices, weather, an obituary, or a piece delivered via wire from hundreds of miles away. He clips the sheet in front of him and begins reading a sentence that no one outside the newsroom has seen yet. A Linotype keyboard includes approximately 90 keys. To a first-time visitor, the arrangement appears incorrect. The traditional QWERTY layout is missing. Lowercase letters, capital letters, numbers, punctuation, and other characters are organized for the Linotype operator's task rather than the office typist. The most frequently used lowercase letters are placed where skilled hands can rapidly get them. This disparity results in one of printing history's oddest unintentional phrases. The first two columns of common lowercase keys begin with ETAOIN and SHRDLU. When an operator damages a line, he can sometimes run his finger down the columns to quickly fill it. ETAOIN SHRDLU transforms into a composing room ghost. Normally, the nasty slug is eliminated. Occasionally, it makes it into print, leaving readers wondering what the weird letters represent. Historical newspaper databases still contain occasions where the phrase escaped correction. However, speed does not imply that the operator reads recklessly. He needs to read ahead. Linotype lines have a set measurement. The operator must determine where a line terminates, where a word might be separated, and whether the spacing is justified across the column. He reads ahead as the assembly fills. Every keystroke causes something to be released physically. When you press T, a brass matrix containing the mold for that character drops from its channel in the magazine. Press another letter, and another matrix appears. For a space, the machine inserts a spaceband, which is a wedge-shaped device that expands to fill the exact width of the newspaper column. The matrices form in front of him, letter by letter and word by word. He is not typing a text. He is creating a mold. When the line is completed, the operator feeds it into the machine. The spacebands extend, separating the words until the line is justified to the appropriate width. The completed matrices move toward the mold disk. Then the casting system takes over. Molten type metal, an alloy mostly composed of lead, tin, and antimony, is pressed against the matrices. The metal fills the letter shapes and cools, forming a solid rectangular slug with one elevated line of text. The Linotype name is derived directly from the result, a line of type. The machine trims the slug and places it in a tray. The brass matrices are then routed into the distributor, where coated teeth direct each one back into the appropriate magazine channel. As a result, the molds can be reused multiple times, while finished lines accumulate as metal. The cycle moves quickly. Matrices descend, a line turns metal, and molds separate and return to their channels. The operator is already composing the next sentence as fresh slugs gather in a shallow dish known as a galley. His world is restricted. A single sheet of copy, one row of matrices, one hot slug, then the next. Around midnight, the pace shifts. Early in the shift, copy can arrive consistently. Later, important stories start colliding with the deadline. A council meeting ends late. A baseball game goes into extra innings. The election numbers fluctuate. The preceding version was replaced by a wire service bulletin. The newsroom may alter a story in a matter of minutes. The composing room needs to be rebuilt in metal. When an editor revises a paragraph, the original slugs remain unchanged. They need to be identified, removed, reset, recast, proofed, and reinserted into the column. This is where Linotype's speed transformed newspapers. Before line casting machines, compositors typed one character at a time. After commercial Linotype operation began in the 1880s, an operator could compose and cast a complete line simultaneously. This significant boost in speed made larger publications, later deadlines, and many editions feasible. However, speedier technology does not reduce deadline pressure. It pushes the deadline later. Editors understand that a significant story can be revised closer to press time because the composing room resets it quickly. The equipment allows the newspaper extra time to collect news. The operator has less time to convert that news into type. The proof is returned with a mark in the midst of a paragraph. One word is incorrect. A Linotype line is made up of a single piece of metal. The operator resets the line. Because its letters were cast together, a rectified word usually indicates an entirely new slug. Errors carry weight. A misspelled name is no longer considered an abstract error. It sits in a galley as a piece of metal that must be removed, replaced, and finally burned down. Proofreaders consequently play an important role between the operator and the press. They compare trial impressions to original copies and make modifications for the composing room. The Labor Department classified proofreading as a skilled composing room activity that is closely related to typesetting. The operator becomes fast because he must, and accurate because speed without accuracy leads to greater work. An improperly set line disrupts the page, consumes proofreading time, and brings everyone closer to the deadline. Then there are non-linguistic blunders. A matrix may fall into the incorrect channel. A spaceband can stick. A distributor can jam. Metal can produce poor casting results. The operator must determine whether the problem stems from his fingers, the copy, the matrices, or the machine. That mechanical awareness is what distinguishes him from the average keyboard worker. His hands can translate languages. His ears keep track of equipment. Experienced operators learn their linotypes partially through sound. A healthy machine contains rhythms inside its noise, matrices descending, mechanisms cycling, the distributor moving above, and slugs ejecting below. When the rhythm shifts, the operator notices. A matrix may fail to drop, a line may transfer incorrectly, or a utilized matrix may not return to the distributor. If the operator continues to force the machine, a minor halt can become a major jam. The fastest operator is not usually the man with the fastest fingers. Often, the male loses the least amount of time. He sees flaws early on, corrects what he is taught to correct, and knows when to contact the machinist, rather than causing further damage. There is heat below this concentration. The casting pot holds molten metal at around 550 degrees Fahrenheit. The composing room may contain numerous machines, each of which generates heat, mechanical noise, and the odor of hot machinery and type metal. He also feeds the machinery. New blocks or pigs of type metal enter the melting pot, while rejected slugs can be remelted. Loading new type metal was one of the practical activities traditionally connected with linotype operation. The newspaper is continuously developing and destroying its own physical language. Corrections made tonight can become sentences for tomorrow. Near 3 in the morning, the composing room is already filled with metal when the newsroom sends down a new lead story. A fire has broken out downtown. The first version is short, and the operator begins setting immediately. Then the updated copy arrives. The fire has spread. Another reporter has arrived at the scene. The initial paragraph changes, followed by a street name, and finally by the casualty report. Each version requires extra lines to be cast. This is where the work becomes painfully simple. The operator cannot control the flames. He cannot control the editor. He cannot control when the presses must commence. He controls just the speed and accuracy with which language becomes metal. The keyboard shakes beneath his palms. Matrices decrease. Spacebands enter. The assembler fills. Cast. Next line. Cast. Next line. The metal tray becomes heavier. Across the room, additional operators are performing the same tasks with sports, national news, financial tables, weather, commercials, and late corrections. One operator may be setting election results, while the next is placing funeral notices. One machine produces baseball scores. Another generates wartime news. Another generates department store advertising. Every subject enters the room as paper copy. Almost everyone leaves as metal. The newspaper is no longer only being written. It is being manufactured. The linotype operator's slugs are just the raw material of the printed page. Compositors organize them into columns, including headlines, rules, advertisements, photos, and other print features. Evidence is pulled. Corrections have returned. The clock keeps going. A line that appeared correct at the keyboard may still fail in context. A paragraph may be too long, a name may be incorrect, or an editor may trim lines to accommodate a late shot. The operator can complete a story and then receive a portion of it back. Nothing in the composing studio is actually final until the page is published. And as they move closer to press time, each adjustment gets more expensive, not necessarily in dollars, but in minutes. If a late modification requires 10 lines to be reset, those 10 lines must compete with all other stories that are still waiting. If the size of a headline changes, so does the space beneath it. If the space changes, the story may have to be trimmed. If the plot is reduced, metal that has already been cast may need to be removed. The newspaper page behaves like a physical puzzle because it is one. Words have dimensions. They have breadth. They have height. They have weight. When the page is eventually freed, the pressure shifts toward the press room. The pages are ready for printing, paper starts moving through the press, and the first copies of the morning edition appear at a rate that no linotype operator could match by hand. For the reader, the newspaper simply appears. For the operator, each column represents a record of hundreds of decisions that had to withstand keyboard, casting pot, galley, proof, correction, page assembly, and press. Linotype operation was a skilled trade acquired through extensive training rather than a brief typing school. Apprentices may spend years acquiring type, spelling, proofreading, layout, and shop practice before specializing in machine composition. Mechanical competence was important because the operator needed to troubleshoot ordinary faults as well as set copy. Government occupational research identified machine composition as having a higher requirement for mechanical expertise. The trade also had a strong union identity. The International Typographical Union represented a considerable proportion of composing room workers, including linotype operators. An expert operator could read tough content while setting it, divide words without breaking rhythm, hear a matrix fail, determine if a line was justified, and output column after column as the press deadline approached. The labor was sedentary in comparison to many other industrial trades. It was not a relaxed atmosphere. For hours, he had to keep his focus on both language and machines. One wrong key could result in a printed mistake. One machine error could cost many minutes. And a few wasted minutes at the end of the night could affect an entire issue. Repetition creates additional pressure. The operator may have already cast thousands of lines this week. Most of them will not be remembered. Yesterday's headlines are already outdated. However, he cannot take tonight's line nonchalantly. The reader of an obituary is concerned about whether the name is spelled correctly. The voter reading an election result is interested in which candidate won. The investor checking a market figure is concerned about if a number has been swapped. Mass production does not render any one line obsolete. It simply forces the operator to care about them more quickly. By the 1960s and 1970s, the technology that had previously revolutionized newspapers had become outdated. Instead of casting each line in metal, phototypesetting might make type through photography. Perforated tape and later computer systems enabled text to be transferred from a keyboard to composition without requiring a pot of molten alloy beside each operator. The alteration targeted the linotype at its peak strength. For over a century, it was quick because it integrated composition and casting in a single machine. Newspapers might now remove casting. There was no need to build a heavy slug for each line. distribute brass matrices after each cast, remelt discarded types, or keep rows of complicated hot metal machinery. During the changeover, the Department of Labor described phototypesetting as an increasingly essential replacement for metal composition. By the late 1970s, leading American newspapers had shifted firmly to electronic composition. The Washington Post openly described Linotype as a vanishing technology in 1977, and in July 1978, the age of linotype printing at the New York Times came to an end when electronic production took control. The composing room got calmer and brighter. Words no longer had to weigh anything before being printed. The final fix arrives in the hot metal composing area just minutes before release. It's one line from the fire story. The operator resets it. The matrices fall cleanly. He inserts the spaces. The line is measured. He sends it to be cast. Inside the machine, molten metal meets brass molds for the final time. The slug falls. A compositor eliminates it, deletes the previous line, and inserts the repair into the page. The page then exits the composing area. The operator eventually glances down at the metal around his station, wasted slugs, rectified lines, and new type ready to be remelted. Nothing looks like breaking news anymore. It looks like scrap. However, before daylight, that metal had already completed its task. Presses start spinning. Bundles are knotted. Trucks exit the loading docks. Carriers and distribution routes move the addition outward while the city remains dark. A reader will open the newspaper over breakfast and find a fire, an election, a baseball score, a funeral notice, and a market report. He'll see words. He won't notice the brass matrices that made them. He won't feel the weight of the slugs. And he'll have no idea that just a few hours before, every line on the page had to pass through the hands of a competent operator before briefly existing as hot metal. Before the morning news could be printed by dawn, it needed to be cast.